All right, guys, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Hope everybody is doing well. It's great to be back from the trip to Florida, St. John's, and back to the Potomac. Potomac, Maryland, the Potomac haunts. Tidal Potomac as well as the Upper Potomac, and they couldn't really be any different than they are right now. And this happens a lot in the spring because a lot of the rains and a lot of the stuff that happens up in the north comes down through the Potomac, through the Upper Potomac, and down through D.C., and then makes its way towards the Tidal Potomac, right? So it's not uncommon for the Upper Potomac to be in one kind of state of condition, and then the Tidal Potomac, which is the Lower Potomac, to be in a completely different state. Let's think about this. It's the same temperature today, okay, in the DC DMV area that it was when I was in Florida just at the end of last week. Think about that. 85 to 86 degrees today. Kicking the water temperature up a little bit more, for sure. But yet the last time I was back on the Tidal Potomac, there were events on the Tidal Potomac for the Battle Series, and basically the water was just complete crap. It was kind of like it rained the before, but it was just kind of like, wasn't really optimal conditions, right? You would think for April, right? April fishing. We all fall into that trap that spawn is typically that April full moon to the June full moon, right? That 6 or 8 week window for spawn. And sure enough, back in April, when I fished a couple days on the Potomac River, there were some signs of spawning, and now they are spawning. Okay. And so that's kind of a distinction. That's how quickly things change, from pre-spawn to spawn. And that's quite different on the Upper Potomac to the Tidal Potomac. The influences are different. Okay. That impact of the tide, that impact of a lot of other things is quite different. And the species are different, right? So you got smallmouth in the upper and predominantly green fish down in the Tidal, except for you got some smallies in the middle in DC. Now, back in April, the DC area, which would be above the bridge going up into DC all the way to Georgetown, to be frank, okay? And I know people that are catching both largemouth, smallmouth, catfish, everything in and around Georgetown on the Potomac River, okay? We knew where the conditions were, right? In that state of back in April, okay? And it changes that quickly after the full moon. So after that full moon in April. And I really think it changes more on the Tidal Potomac than it does the Upper Potomac. I really do. It's just because of the tidal influences, the lunar pattern, all that. Remember, we had the eclipse. Remember, we've had all this kind of crazy stuff that I believe has impacted the spawn in the Tidal that hasn't impacted at all what will happen with the spawn with the smallmouth in the Upper Potomac. And so those are really the conditions. 85 degrees, almost 86 degrees on the Potomac today. But here's the kicker. And first of all, we got some events coming up. We've got a Battle Series Super on Friday. We've got the first BFL event, which is the Shenandoah Division, on Saturday. And then next Saturday, we've got, I believe it's the Northeast Division of the BFL. That's the Phoenix Bass Fishing League for MLF. Back-to-backs, okay, on the Potomac, which is, not uncommon. There are going to be tournaments every weekend from now until June on the Potomac River, either leaving Leesylvania or Smallwood. That's just the way it is. But in April, the bite was predominantly a DC bite. You've got a couple kayak fishing events that went down on the Potomac in April. I think the weekend of the 20th and the 21st, which kind of gave you, I don't think they came in with over 90 inches, which is, again, they weren't fishing up in the DC area. And, if you're following a lot of the stuff that's happening in the DC area, you'll know that 6-pounders, 6.5 pounders, a 7-pounder, all that was being caught up in the DC. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that above the bridge going up into DC, you've got warm water runoff. The water up there is always, in the early spring, is always warmer than the middle river, right? The middle river catches up as we get into May and June in terms of temperatures, because you've got the influences from the city, and you've got Maryland, and you've got all that, where the water is in late March, early April, warmer. It just is. And if the water is warmer, the bass behave differently, right? That's why I've always said, like, if you're fishing in March and April, you should be fishing up towards the spoils and above. You should be fishing up Mount Vernon all the way. You should be fishing into DC, okay? Because the water's warmer, their behaviors are ahead of the middle river. And you can easily get up there if you're running your boat, launching from, like, you know, a bunch of launches on the Maryland side to get up in there. Just make sure you have a DC license. Well, now in May, this is where the middle river of the Potomac tidal catches up, okay? This is where now we're in spawn. This is where now we're at 85 degrees. Now, the kicker for these events this weekend, and I've talked to a few guys last night and today, just asking my opinion, is we're going to have a 20-degree drop like that. And that sucks for tournament guys. I mean, I know it just does. For those of us who aren't, you know, avid tournament anglers, we're fans of tournaments, but we love and have a passion of fishing. We fish 2 or 3 times a week, but we don't play the tournament game. You know, for us, it's not as big of a deal. Okay. Like, it's like, okay, well, bite may be a little slower, but the bite's been great. And then it's 80, it's 75, 80, 85, water's coming up. Okay. The water's better than it was 2 weeks ago in terms of clarity. You know, they're moving to beds, they're on beds. And then all of a sudden it goes from 86 degrees today to be 65 degrees on Saturday. Okay. That is going, I don't care. I hear it all the time. The experts, and I'm certainly not one, but the experts tell us a lot of things about fishing, but they're not really on point with bass behavior. Okay. A 20 degree change from 85 degrees to 65 degrees. Okay. Think about it from the terms of, you're at the beach, you're down at Hatteras, you're at North Carolina beaches, South Carolina beaches, you're at Myrtle Beach, you're down in Florida, and it was 85 degrees today, and you wake up tomorrow and you go on that deck at the beach and it's 65 degrees, what's your reaction going to be? And people seem to think that fish don't, like, have any kind of, like, they're just fish, right? Like, no, okay? It's going to have a negative impact on the fish. Now, it may not have that negative impact if it happens Friday to Saturday, but if it's sustained from 85 to 65, and then stays in the low 60s for Friday and Saturday and Sunday, yeah, on the back end of that, it's not going to be the same bite as it is. And of course, we know the river changes every day. And so that's where that's at. So that changes. The guys have been pre-fishing since Monday, and now it's everything they had dialed in, and they will. And again, it does not matter. I mean, if you are on the tidal Potomac right now, the bass are spawning on flats. You're looking for flats. You're looking for deeper water adjacent to flats, because not all of them come up and actually spawn at the same time. Anywhere where there's any kind of, like, shell bed, lack of a better term, anything like that they like. You know what I'm saying? That's out. You know, one of the reasons why I think people totally underestimate flats in terms of locating largemouth bass this time of year is they immediately seem to think that like all the bass in the Potomac River go up in the creeks to spawn. That's just not true. Like, it's just not. And we get inundated with the narratives a lot of times because of tournaments. Okay. Because if everybody goes to the creeks and catch fish, we think that that's where all the fish are. Okay. It's just not a lot of times it's just not the case. You can find them on flats. You can find them, in deeper cuts, and a lot of times what you'll see is, I've always said this thing. I always kind of feel like when they make these beds, they kind of like there to be sun. They kind of like to have sun over their heads. So a lot of times you'll come across beds that are in pockets of windows where there's no grass, right? So like when you come across them, you'll see that there's an area that doesn't have grass and it's surrounded by grass that you could see, preferably milfoil. and you could see that when the sun goes through there, and you'll end up. It's for some reason it's just a kind of a phenomenon. I don't know why that is, but you see that a lot. Okay, when you're finding them out in the river, not necessarily in Mattawoman or in the back of a creek, Aquia or Potomac Creek or whatever. It's a little bit different. And I believe in resident bass. I believe resident bass exists. I believe there are bass that live in Mattawoman, that live in Aquia, that live in Potomac, okay, that live in Powell's Creek, that don't ever leave. I do. And so that's a different behavioral characteristic than, say, those bass that are coming in from Belmont to run up the Quan, which is one of my favorite bites, and this still be this time of year. I prefer the shad run. It's why, like, when you look at, like, large swim baits, right? That's the time of year. Not saying you can't catch, because we know that a 6.5 pounder largemouth was just caught off a massive swim bait on the Potomac this week. But, like, I like the swim baits, okay? During that shad run, like up the Quan. That's the Occoquan for those who aren't familiar from around here. They'll run from Belmont, run from the river to Belmont Bay to up the Quan until they can't go anymore. Okay? And those hickory shad will run all the way up until they can't go anymore. Okay? And the largemouth will be feeding on them in March and April when that starts the whole time. And that's when, your bigger baits. Plus, there's tons of docks there. I just love that stretch. Okay? Because you've got a lot of everything. If you go out into the bay and you come back, you got all the docks, the marinas. You got that bite. You've got a whole bunch of opportunities there. You've got the grass that's out in the bay now that's come back. You can go up and around and do Pohick on the other side of Mason Neck as well if you're a big grass guy, jig guy as well. So there's a lot of opportunities in that area. But during the run, in the upper bay, for example, for Maryland guys, everyone will be familiar with the perch run. Like, there'll be perch that are running. And it's the same thing. It becomes a freaking feeding frenzy. Okay. So anything that's like a bleeding shad pattern of anything you got that, doesn't have to be a swim bait, it could be crankbait, it could be all those things, are like always going to be effective. That's just the key. The only 2 times a year for me for swim baits of this variety are during that run or as we get later in the fall. Now, for me, that does not mean that somebody hasn't won an event with swim baits. A professional hasn't won an event with swim baits, on the Potomac. I mean, that certainly can happen. My favorite has always been, in mine, it's probably caught 4 or 5 5-pounders plus on the Tidal Potomac, is this pattern right here. It's kind of like my bread and butter. All right. I love this pattern. And it's kind of a pattern that translates over to a lot of the baits I'm going to talk about today because of the colors on it. Okay. And I still think that's a big thing. I used to not believe it was as true with action on crankbaits, with action and noise and all those things to me were always the priority, and the color really wasn't a big deal, like, craw colored crankbaits. It was really the action and the noise. But when it comes to swim baits, it's different, I found, because I can't really explain why you can throw these that really mirror, okay, that forage species during the hickory run. There's less American shad, obviously, but there's still some American shad. Then when you throw a completely, a bone color or all these other color swim baits you can get, and you just don't get any hookup. You don't get any. But so it kind of like gets you in that position where crap, it very well may be the color. And so some of you guys may know we began a smallmouth series this year, which focuses on all the small rivers in the region. So we've got some partners and supporting partners for that series that, I had not, had any experience with. And one of them is Hardturn, and met those folks, Jason and his wife, at the Richmond Fishing Expo back in January. And, they, along with their daughter, do incredible swim baits. Okay. Not, they also do that glide bait. But like just colors that, are going to be effective. Okay. If you're a swim bait guy. Okay. And not going to break the bank either. I mean, that's been my biggest thing with swim baits. And a lot of people, when I talk to them at the ramp and stuff, is like, Jay, the swim baits are like $80, $100, $150. You know, I've talked to some guys that have dropped $200 on swim baits. But for most people, that's really not, you know, in the average guy isn't, you know, that's a rod. Okay. That's a really high quality rod, guys. Right. Like, and so I just like the fact, not only the work that's done and the coat on and the designs of these swim baits, but as well as the action of them. You know, they're just like, to me, rank up there with a lot of the swim baits that, you know, people have given me to like try, or I've bought. They're like $70, $80. You know, and they've got all the action, awesome hooks, come standard. I mean, these things are sick, guys. Like you know, and as you guys, most of you know, have followed my channel for like ever. Whoa, it's like custom. It's like you know, there's something to be said, you know, for the custom. And you got, you know, anyone who's familiar with swim baits, they kind of get it and understand that, you know, where the expense comes in because of the production. But all these are different sizes too, guys. And so that's what I liked about them, is they weren't nearly as big. I mean, look at the difference between this and this, the glide bait versus the swim bait. Okay. And I can tell you, and a lot of people, you know, may have a different opinion, but these are going to catch smallmouth as well. Okay. These are catching smallmouth as well.